Blue Flag is an LGBT manga I've been recommended constantly throughout my YouTube journey. And funnily enough, I've already read it. As politely as I can put it, I don't talk about it much because the final stretch of the story disappointed me so deeply that I can't in good faith recommend it. Which is a shame because the premise had me hooked. A love triangle that isn't fully straight, with one boy secretly in love with his best friend. It definitely got my interest pretty quick. I'm genuinely glad that Shonen Jump, in this case Jump Plus, allowed for queer characters and storylines to join the magazine after Fire Punch and Astra Lost in Space. Even now we have Marriage Toxin, which is one of my favourite ongoing series. But Blue Flag has too many glaring and infuriating depictions and discussions of misogyny and queerness for me to overlook. And again, I want to preface that all opinions here are mine, and I'm not judging people who read and love this story. There's a lot about it I also enjoy. More than anything, I want to try something new on the channel and cover my criticisms of a story in the fairest way possible. I'm not here to tear it down for the sake of it, but to let you guys know why, until this point, I never talked about it. I'll be breaking my criticisms down section by section, starting with the smaller issues and working my way up to what frustrated me the most. But something I never had issues with is Skillshare, today's sponsor. Skillshare is the largest online learner community for creatives, with thousands of classes across topics like writing, illustration, video editing, and more. It's an on-demand platform with modular lessons, so everyone can learn at their own pace, no matter their skill level. While working on my novel, I've been using Milanote to stay organised, but I needed a bit of guidance as it's not the easiest to navigate. So I joined Nashay Snow's step-by-step guide to Milanote for beginners on Skillshare, and she really helped me structure my ideas without feeling overwhelmed. If you're into storytelling, I recommend Story Structure Writing a Plot Outline by Lizzie the Writer, or Writing Authentic Fiction by Sabah Tahir. These classes help you build believable characters and emotionally grounded narratives, something Blue Flag really made me think about. So if you're interested, the first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive 20% off their first year of Skillshare. Plenty of time to pick up a new skill with trained experts guiding you along the way. A big thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. So first up, the time skip. Funnily enough, whilst it's the part most people complain about, it was actually the least of my issues, though that's not to say it's in the clear. First, I was really disappointed that the story spent several chapters trying to sympathise with homophobic ramblings, yet left only one single chapter to show the main couple happy together. And due to the final chapter's point of view, which I actually really liked and thought it was a nice touch, we never even see Toma and Taichi in the same frame. After all the build-up, drama and emotional weight the story throws at their relationship, I feel like readers earned some time seeing them happy. Instead, we jump from "I like being with you, it's fun" to a 7-year time skip where they're suddenly living together and getting married. I know it's common in romance stories to build up the couple getting together, then end it there. I'm not a big fan of that either, but I understand why it's done. Writing established relationships is hard, and people often prefer the chase. But Blue Flag is different because we don't even get the full build-up. There's a lot we miss out on. We never really see Taichi come to terms with his sexuality. Even one honest conversation about bisexuality would have done wonders, especially considering how rarely it's represented in manga. Also, we don't see Taichi break up with Futaba, which, while I found their storyline boring, was still important. We also don't see Taichi ask Toma out, or vice versa, we'll never know. We don't see their first kiss or embrace, and those are moments that are usually shown, even if it's in the last chapter. It's very much a case of show don't tell, but here, we're not shown anything either. We're only given the payoff. I probably wouldn't have been as annoyed by all this if not for my second frustration. We rarely see Toma's inner thoughts or emotional reactions, despite how much the story puts him through. A lot of the time, he's literally written out of scenes or whole chapters. It's a real shame we never even get to see him smile at the end, not once. It's implied he's happy, but I wanted to see it. Just one panel, that's all. That said, Toma and Taichi do get a happy ending, and for that alone, I don't have complaints. I genuinely liked the development of their dynamic and found it endearing. So their ending isn't the worst I've read, and again, it's not my biggest grievance with the story. You could even argue that its success helped pave the way for more LGBT characters in Jump, or at least showed executives that there's a real audience for these kind of stories. So I'm glad Kaito took a chance on writing Blue Flag, despite my dislike over its time skip, if only because it gave us a canon Achillean couple in a well-regarded magazine. My second biggest issue with Blue Flag is how Masumi is treated. She doesn't appear on any of the covers, and even within the original designs, she's nowhere to be found. That alone makes me wonder if she was even intended to be a main character from the start, or just added later to fill a certain narrative role. And that in itself points to a larger problem. Masumi's story is full of significant emotional moments that never lead anywhere. They're introduced, hinted at, and then either dropped completely or quietly forgotten. One of the clearest examples of this is her scene with Mami. Mami is one of the only characters, aside from Akiko, who actually listens to Masumi and manages to draw out a real emotional reaction from her. And then that scene is never referenced again. And that's what's so frustrating. It always feels like Masumi gets pushed aside just when her story is about to get interesting. Now, I want to be very clear. Masumi being revealed as bisexual or pansexual in the final chapter is not, in itself, a problem. Her being bi is perfectly fine. The problem is the execution. Throughout the entire manga, she never shows romantic or sexual interest in men. At all, not once. If anything, I'd argue it's drilled into the readers that she literally has no interest in them at all. So when the final chapter reveals she's married a man, a random guy we've never seen before, who I'll get to later, it doesn't feel right. For me, it reads more like the "you'll grow out of it" or "you just need to find the right man" rhetoric, which we still see applied to lesbians both in real life and fiction. I can't argue with canon, that's how the story wraps up. Masumi is bi or pan, but the way she's written throughout the rest of the manga tells a very different story. That she's a lesbian with compet, and that's why the final twist doesn't feel earned, and was more like a slap to the face as someone rooting for her throughout the entire narrative. So to back up my thoughts, let's start with some quotes of her own. "The person I want to be. Why must you be so afraid of the prying eyes of others? I want to be a good person. I want to be someone I can be proud of. I want to be the kind of person my family wants me to be." Both of these quotes suggest that Masumi knows she's into girls, but feels shame about it. Shame that's coming from outside expectations. It reads as someone who dates men out of obligation, not desire. She wants to make people, her family, proud, and due to societal pressures and shame regarding homosexuality, feels she can't do that unless she's only dating men. So that leads me to two more important quotes. What about romantic love between two people of the same gender? Is that okay? Because I couldn't fall in love with him. That second quote is her explanation for why she broke up with her boyfriend, and honestly, it couldn't be more clear. She just didn't have feelings for him. And it's not that she just didn't love him, it's that she doesn't seem capable of falling for any guy. That's backed up again when she tells Torma, "You and I are the same." All of these quotations are definitely spoken from a girl interested in girls. And besides the one quote about not being in love with a boy, you could definitely argue it's still up in the air whether she's bi or pan. But her reactions to men are consistently distant, annoyed, or indifferent. She often shows annoyance at being around Taichi or Torma, and actively avoids situations that would place her in close proximity to them unless forced to. She looks at men irritably often, and when Taichi asks her to hang out, she turns him down without a second thought. Every romantic relationship she has with boys is initiated by them, never her. And the relationships always fall apart quickly. Even when Futaba is worrying about how long distance will affect her relationship with Taichi, Masumi seems indifferent about being distant with her own boyfriend. She's not sad about the situation, just resigned to the fact that she'll have to break up with another boyfriend. Contrast that with how Taichi's bisexuality is hinted at. We see him show interest in both Futaba and Torma. That exploration is there. With Masumi, it's not. There's no build-up, no hint of her having any romantic or sexual feelings for a boy, ever. And that changes when it comes to women and girls. Masumi confides in Akiko and Mami in ways she never does with any of the male characters. Minus Taichi, but that's only because he caught her being emotional as opposed to Masumi seeking him out for help. But it's through connections with women that we see glimpses of her true self, and the only times we see Masumi truly happy is when she's around Futaba. I know many will disagree with me when I say Masumi was written as a lesbian, and that's totally fair. Bisexual rep is a rarity in manga, and it's completely valid to see yourself in Masumi. I wish there were more stories with bisexual characters. If her attraction to men had been seeded throughout the story, I'd be the first to welcome and understand. But to me, Masumi's disinterest in men is so total, so thoroughly embedded in her characterization, that the sudden reveal in the final chapter feels like a narrative whiplash, which links to the next part of Masumi's story, the sudden husband. To make things even more jarring, Masumi's husband is a stranger.
I hate to say it, I hope I don't sound ridiculous. I don't know who this man is. I mean, he could be walking down the street, I wouldn't know a thing.
And essentially a gender-swapped version of Futaba. Even Taichi comments on how similar Masumi's husband is to her. There's a moment where her husband mentions that Masumi grumbles about not being on either side anymore. And that line, it could have opened the door to a genuinely thoughtful conversation about bisexuality. A lot of bisexual people feel that sense of otherness, being seen as too straight for queer spaces or too queer for straight ones. And that's a real, complicated experience deserving of exploration. But here, it's just a throwaway line tossed in with no follow-up or development. Now, I know some readers interpret Masumi's husband as a trans man. There's no explicit confirmation in the text, but there are some subtle hints, like his discomfort in a suit or his comments about not fitting in anywhere. It's possible Masumi started dating him before he came out and continued their relationship after his transition. That would make a lot of sense contextually. Genuinely, the idea of someone navigating their partner coming out as trans and how that intersects with their own understanding of sexuality is incredibly rich with nuance. It's a dynamic that's barely ever explored in manga, and it would have been so meaningful to see it done here. As it stands though, nothing's confirmed, so I'm left 50-50 on what to make of their relationship, because at the end of the day, Masumi still ends up with a man, despite her showing no interest in them prior to the final chapter. Which leads to my largest issue of Blue Flag, Kensuke's homophobia. My issues with Kensuke are pretty straightforward. He's misogynistic, he's homophobic, and his behaviour isn't challenged enough. He repeatedly crosses boundaries, especially when it comes to Mami. He butts into private conversations she's having with Taichi, pushes for answers he's not entitled to, and acts like he deserves to know what's going on simply because he has a crush on her. He never takes no for an answer. And it makes scenes like this frustrating to me when it comes from a character who refuses to respect boundaries. And what's worse is the contrast in how the story treats other guys who are reflections of Kensuke. These sleazy, one-off background characters who act gross for a single scene are immediately reprimanded. It's inconsistent, and it makes it hard to believe the story fully understands how misogynistic his behaviour is. Now Kensuke, after punching and outing Toma, has a conversation with Shingo, Shoko and Sayaka. It's meant to be a reflective moment, but it really left me frustrated. The conversation can basically be summed up by, feelings aren't good or bad, they just are. And while that might sound neutral on the surface, it raises a big issue. Because when those feelings include violent homophobia, framing them as morally neutral sends a troubling message. The result is a chapter that ends up feeling more like justification than critique, because it introduces Kensuke's backstory that he was molested by a man when he was younger. And that's a serious topic, but it's presented less as a moment of meaningful character exploration and more as a narrative excuse that's never touched on again. Rather than thoughtfully examining how trauma can shape a person's worldview and how that doesn't justify harmful beliefs, the manga uses this revelation to explain away his homophobia. What's especially concerning is that this leans heavily into the gay predator trope, a damaging and outdated narrative device that falsely links queerness with predatory behaviour. Kensuke even says he knows not all gay men are like that, but then immediately follows it with, only a handful are the exception. That kind of logic doesn't challenge prejudice, it enforces it. And this is worsened when Kensuke compares his disgust of gay men to how some women become man-haters after being assaulted. But these two situations are not equivalent. Women's fear of men is rooted in widespread systemic violence. It's not just personal, it's societal. Trying to equate that with Kensuke's fear of gay men reduces an entire history of gendered violence into a one-dimensional analogy, and it just doesn't hold up under scrutiny. In addition, when he brings up how girls also suffer through sexual harassment, he says, "But when girls are victims of that crap," that phrasing, especially "that crap," comes across as incredibly dismissive. It's as if he's trying to make a broader point about double standards, but in doing so, he ends up minimising the very thing he's comparing his own experience to. Now, to be fair, he might use dismissive language not out of cruelty, but because he doesn't know how to process it. But considering how he treats Mami, it feels more like a consistent pattern of not fully understanding or respecting women's pain. Now, Shoko and Sayaka push back on Kensuke's views to some degree, but the weight of their criticism doesn't feel like it's fully supported by the narrative. Their objections are often emotional or brief, while characters like Shingo are framed as calm, collected, and more reasonable. This imbalance isn't just frustrating, it reinforces a familiar misogynistic storytelling pattern where women are cast as reactive and emotional, while men are given space to be thoughtful and composed. Even when Kensuke and Shingo are being challenged, the narrative gives them the most time to speak, reflect, and be understood. As a result, the more empathetic or progressive voices feel subtly undermined by the structure of the scene itself. And then we get Shingo's monologue, where he tries to play the both sides card, arguing that criticising Kensuke's homophobia is just another form of intolerance. It's presented as centricism, but it completely misses the point. Disliking someone for who they are, their sexuality, gender, race, is not the same as disliking someone because they're bigoted. There's a difference between prejudice and accountability, and that distinction gets really muddy in this scene. End of the day, Torma got punched by Kensuke because he found out Torma was gay. There's no excuse for that homophobia at all. My main takeaway from this scene is, what message does it send to teenage boys, the very audience this story is aimed towards? Some might walk away thinking, oh, so people judging me for not liking gay people are just as bad as me being homophobic. By trying to play devil's advocate, the narrative avoids taking a firm stance where it really matters. Homophobia is harmful, full stop. That's why the girls, one of whom is Kensuke's own girlfriend, end up walking away. And what's worse is that we never hear Torma's side of things, never hear his thoughts or feelings, and he's the true victim of all of this. For a series that centres so much on queer characters, it's frustrating how little empathy the story gives them in critical moments like this. To conclude, there are definitely things I like about Blue Flag. The art style is gorgeous, expressive and fluid, and I especially appreciated how much attention was paid to subtle shifts in characters' expressions. Those quiet, emotional beats added a lot of texture to the story. That said, Blue Flag is often described as an LGBT manga, and while it does explore some meaningful topics, the final quarter felt incredibly flat to me. The emotional payoff just wasn't there. If it was a censorship problem, then fair enough, that's out of the creator's hands. But Kaito himself stated multiple times that he was given free rein to do whatever he wanted with the series. So when the ending feels rushed, it's hard to not feel frustrated. But I'll gladly read more of Kaito's work if he ever returns to the manga scene. While I have my issues with Blue Flag, I'd never dismiss the potential to see a mangaka grow from their earlier stories and go on to create something even more resonant. I'd be genuinely interested in what he creates next, for the people those stories might reach too. Hey guys, thanks for watching to the end of the video. As always, I'm going to be very quick. I'm going to be completely honest. It's the hottest day of the year in the UK right now, and I'm melting because I've just turned off the only fan I have in this room, and I'm quite genuinely being melted alive. So I just want to say an absolutely massive thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video, and also a massive thank you to everyone on Patreon for helping support the channel. I appreciate it a massive amount, and hopefully I'm going to be getting my office or an office soon-ish. I've got to do a Wi-Fi test there, so it depends on how that goes as to whether or not I move in. But if I do, that's quite literally all down to people on Patreon and also you guys on YouTube for clicking the video and helping me out. So I appreciate that a lot, and I know this is kind of like one of the first constructive videos that I've done on the channel. I know I did the one on Berserk, but I don't really feel like that was constructive necessarily, like against the manga. A little nervous as to what the comments will be, but at the same time I feel like I went about the video in hopefully the nicest way I possibly can, so please bear with me. If you enjoyed this kind of video format instead, as just like a nice change, do let me know in the comments as well. There aren't really many manga that I have a lot against or ones that I'm like massively constructive of. If people also like this on top of the positive videos, then that's something that I'll also consider as well. With all that said, I'm absolutely sweating, so I'm gonna have to say goodbye to everyone fairly quickly, but I'll catch you guys in the next one as usual.